Welcome back. In this video we're going to be creating a better death scene for our little bunny over here, and we're also going to be adding some scoring here so that players know how well or how badly they do when they play the game. So the first thing we're going to do to create our death scene for our bunny is to create a new animation for the death scene. And so what we're going to do is we will find in our bunny sprite, we're going to take this little hurt bunny image over here and we'll drag it into our sprites, and then we will select our bunny and go to the animation folder. There's a little bit of a quirk in Unity. If you see this thing here asking you to create an animation clip, and we know we actually already have one, if you just run the game first and when you run the game back again, we should get all our animations back the way they were. So we want to create ourselves a new animation, and we're going to create a new clip, and we're going to call this bunny hurt. Save that. And then for this, in the same way as we do for our other animations, we're going to make it a 15 frames per second animation, and we're going to take, it's just going to have a single frame, which is this one over here. Drag that into position number 1, and if we run that we should see our little hurt animation, which is just the bunny sitting there. Excellent. Now in our animator we will have our bunny running and our transitions to our bunny jumping, and we now have our new bunny hurt animation here. So what we're going to do is we're going to firstly create a new property, and it's going to be a Boolean property, and we're going to call this property bunny hurt, and this is the value we'll be setting in our code to indicate that the bunny has been hurt or killed in our case. And what we're going to do is we're going to say that we're going to create a new transition from the any state to the bunny hurt, and we're using the any state because the bunny could be injured whilst running or jumping, so we don't want to have to map explicit transitions from these two states. So we can say from the any state we can go to the bunny hurt state, which will trigger our bunny hurt animation. And what we're going to do, like we've done for the others, we're going to add a condition to that transition so it doesn't fire all the time. What we're going to do is we'll put a add there, and we're going to say if the bunny hurt is true, then complete that transition. And so if we run the game now, we can see the game playing, and if we toggle on and off the animation, we can control the state there. So our animation is all set up. Alright. So now we need to wire that animation into our code. So we'll go find our scripts, and we'll go find our bunny controller, and we're going to wire him into here. So if we look at our previous code that we finished last time, we'll see that when we had the collision and we collided with an enemy, we did a reload of the level, which happens instantaneously. So if we keep that piece of code around, we won't have any time to play our animation. So we need to move that elsewhere and actually only load the level after a delay of a certain amount of time, so that we have time to play our death animation. So what we're going to do is right at the top here, we're going to create ourselves a new private float. We're going to call this bunny hurt time. We're going to set that to -1. And what we're going to do is we're going to store into this value here, when the bunny gets collided with, we're going to store that time value in there, and then later on we can compare to see how much time has passed, and if it's passed a certain amount of time, then we can reload the level. So we'll set bunny hurt time there to -1. Then in our on collision enter, we can for the moment comment this out, for the moment. And what we want to do inside here is that when we collide, we want to say that our bunny hurt time is equal to time dot time, so the current game time. And the other thing that we want to do here, now that we know we've been injured, is we want to set the my animation, which if you recall was the animator that we hooked up in the start method, and is the one we've been doing things like setting the float through to control the animation. Now we want to do a set bool for boolean, and we're going to set the boolean called bunny hurt, and we're going to set it to true. So now when we have the collision with the enemy, we're going to set the bunny hurt time to be the current point in time, and then we're going to set the bunny hurt animation to true, which will trigger that animation. Now in our update method, we can take this piece of code and we're going to move that into our update method. And what we're going to say here is the following. So firstly, if the bunny hurt time is equal to -1, then we're just going to do everything that we've been doing up to now. And you would have seen that we initialized bunny hurt time to -1 over there. So when the game starts running, and whilst it's running, it's just going to be -1. It's going to do all the button checking and the animation setting that we've been doing to date, up until the point in time that we actually collide with something, and then we'll set bunny hurt time to a non-1 value. So we're going to then add an else. So this is the case where bunny has hurt time is not equal to -1, and in here we're going to say we want to set the load level, but we don't want to do it straight away. What we're going to say is that if time.time, which is the current time in the game, is greater than bunny hurt time plus 2, so 2 seconds after we collided. So down here we're going to set the just close that off. Down here when we collide, we're going to set the bunny hurt time to the current time, which if you recall is a time in seconds, and as a decimal number, so you get fractions of a second. And what we're going to say here is if the current time is greater than the bunny hurt time plus 2, so in other words 2 seconds later, then we're going to load the level. All right. And the reason for putting this check here is that if we have if we're dead, we don't want any of this code to fire. We don't want the player to be able to jump whilst they're dead, and etc. So that's why we don't execute any of this code if the bunny hurt time is greater than -1. So if we run that now, switching back to our game, we will see that we can happily jump over things, and when we crash into things, our bunny hurt animation plays, but we kind of get pushed off the screen, and then 2 seconds later the game reloads. If I jump a bit, and then crash, and I get pushed to the screen, which is not quite what we want. Really, we want the entire screen to stop, or all the things on the screen to stop moving. Now, if you remember when we were creating our cacti, we set a component on them called move left, which is the thing that controls the speed at which the cactus is moving to the left. So what we really want to do is we want to disable all the cacti from moving, or stop them all from moving. And luckily that's really easy in Unity, and we can do it with a very simple piece of code. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down into the on-collision enter 2D. We're going to add another bit of code here. What we're going to say is we're going to say for each move left in find objects of type explain this code in a moment. Alright, so what we're going to do here is we're going to use this method available on any game object called find objects of type. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask Unity to find in the current scene all objects of type move left. So that'll be any object that has the move left script or component added to it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go for each, we're going to loop through the list or grab each object that we have that's been returned to us. It actually returns an array of move left objects. So we're going to step through each move left object in our array, and we're going to set its enabled flag equal to false. So you remember this often whilst we've been debugging, we've been turning this little checkbox on things like the bunny on and off. That's to enable and disable game objects. So we're doing the same thing but in code. So if we just drop back to that code again, what we're going to be doing is we're going to find all the objects of type move left, loop through each one, and set its enabled flag to false, so disable the cactus. And that should stop all our current cactus from moving across the screen, stop them from moving. So if we run that now, we can see we've got a little bunny there, we can jump over, and then when we crash, everything just freezes up, except for that one coming on the screen there. So the reason that we get that other cactus coming into the screen is because our cactus spawner, if you watch up here, is spawning a brand new cactus. Oh, didn't happen that time. Let's try it again. No. Jump over a couple more. And I crash now. And then we get a new one being spawned. And because it's just been spawned, it has not been disabled. So it's currently moving on. So this is easy to fix because our cactus spawner, our cactus spawn point has a prefab spawner on it. So once again, with a very simple piece of code, we can find anything that is a prefab spawner and tell it to disable it so that it no longer spawns. So what we can do here is we're going to tweak this bit of code here. We're just going to call this prefab spawner, and we're going to say spawn without enabled equals false. So that means we're going to find anything that's got a prefab spawner attached to it, all the game objects that have that component, and disable them, as well as all the ones that have the move left component. So if we run that again, and everything's good. Jump over here, get one where there's a cactus a bit closer. All right, cool. So now that we've got the bunny running into cacti and doing a death animation, let's make that animation a bit more interesting. What we really want to do is when the bunny hits something, we want it to shoot up in the air and then fall off the bottom of the screen. What we're going to do is in the collision detection code here is we're going to save the time, set the animation, and then what we want to do is firstly we want to stop any kind of motion that the bunny currently has, because he might be in the middle of a jump or just falling down from the top of the screen or something like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the rigid body, which is the thing controlling the physics for the bunny. We're going to set its velocity to 0, vector 2d.0. So we're going to cancel out any velocity it has, any movement it has, and then we're going to replace that by adding some force, and we're going to shoot the body transform.id up. We're going to move it up, and we're going to do it the same amount that we normally do with our bunny jump force. So that piece of code is very similar to what we have is when we normally jump our bunny. In fact, it's the exact same piece of code. We're just going to pretty much trigger the bunny to jump. So we're going to set the velocity to 0, cancel out his current any current movement it has, and then shoot it up into the air for it to fall down. So if we go back and run that now, we shoot up, but unfortunately we just keep bouncing, and you notice the game doesn't stop, and that's because as we're flying up and falling back down, we recolliding, resetting that the bunny hurt timer, and it's just going to keep bouncing over and over again, which is not what we want. We want it to fall off the bottom of the screen. So what we want to do there is disable the bunny from colliding things. So we really want to just disable the box collider that we have, this one over here, the box collider that we have attached to the body, and if we disable that, then the bunny won't collide anymore and it will drop right off the bottom of the screen. So to do that, the first thing we need to do is get ourselves a reference to our collider for our bunny. So we're going to do a private collider 2D, and we're going to call it my collider. And same as we're doing for our rigid body on our animator, we're going to grab the reference to the collider in the start method, which is called when the object is first, when the game object, or the bunny in this case, is first created. Okay. And now that we have that object, we can, in our method here, clear the velocity, add some force, and we can disable the collider. Alright, so jumping back to our game, run our bunny, when we hit, and we fall off the screen, and reset. And fall off the screen. Excellent. Now you might have noticed there that the bunny is falling behind our scenery, and we really want him to fall in front of our scenery, and that's a pretty easy fix. So generally, based on the sorting layer, you'll see that at the moment the bunny is on the default sorting layer, and in fact all our current sprites are on the default sorting layer. So within the default sorting layer, you can change the order in layer. And so in the case of our bunny, what we're going to do is we're going to push him right to the front. We're going to set the bunny's order in the layer to 10, which is closer towards us than everything else in the scene. So if we run that now, and he falls down in front of the screen, or in front of all the other items on the screen. Cool. Righty. So that gives our death scene, or our improved death scene for our bunny. So the next thing to add is our score. And for this, we're going to use Unity's user interface components. And these are found under Game Object, UI, and there's a whole raft of components. And in our case, we're going to add a text field. And you see that Unity firstly has created this shape over here in the background for us, and has created a canvas. It has also, for very strange reasons, made the canvas super big. So if we zoom into our game is way down there, but our canvas is all the way up here. But that's okay, because Unity will resize this boundary to fit your actual screen, which is very useful. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to take our text object that was created. Once again, that was by going Game Object, UI, and selecting the text object. and it's contained by the canvas object that Unity automatically created for us. So we take our text object, we're going to rename this text object to text score, and we are going to set the actual, you can see it faintly down there, there it is there, this is our text. I'll just zoom in a bit on it there so you can see, there it is there. We're going to set the actual initial text for the score to be 0.0, and then we can do a whole bunch of things here, changing the fonts and sizes. So we'll leave the font for Arial for the moment, change the font size to 25, make it bigger. We're going to set the alignment to be right aligned, and we can set the color to be white. Alright, so we zoom back out here. Now the interesting thing is this little crosshair or crossover here. This is what's known as the target or the pivot point for the object, for this object. And because the canvas is designed to grow and shrink or resize, what this is actually doing here is it says the pivot for our text object right in the center of the screen, and the text object should be this relative position away from that pivot, and it will adapt. So if you have a much bigger screen, it will always keep this relative to that point. But we don't actually want it relative to the center of the screen, we'd like it relative to the top corner. So the way to fix that is if you click on this little diagram here, this little thing here, you get a whole bunch of anchor presets, and in our case we want to click that so that it shoots it up to the top corner. So this object now will be relative to the top right corner of the canvas. And then the object itself, we can use, you see here, you can see the Alt key to also set the position. So we hold down Alt, we get some other options. In our case, we're going to shove it up into the top corner. So it's anchored in the top right corner, relative to top right corner, and it's actually going to be at that position there. So if we run the game now, we see we've got a text field being drawn in the top right corner. That's a little cramped, so what we can do is if we can select the text here, we can actually click and drag it a little bit around, and so that will be once again, it's going to be still positioned relative to the top right corner, but it's going to be this amount of distance away from either side, so that will give us a bit of padding or margin. I might just pull that down a smidgen. There we are. So once again, if we run that now, we can see it's not shoved right into the corner of the screen there. Might move it a little bit more this way. Okay, and we can also resize the oops, grab the wrong bit there. We can also resize the field to something about there, because we're never expecting the score to be particularly big. So assuming the person manages to survive for 999.9 seconds, that's how much space it's going to take up. Cool. Oh yes, and we also want to fix that up. It's lost its name, so this is going to be txt score. All right. So we should also probably give this one a label. So what we can do is we can go back to our game object UI and insert another text field, and instead of it being directly on the canvas, we're going to make it a child of text score, and we're going to rename this particular one to be LBL for label score. And we're going to give it a piece of text saying score. We're going to make it same size as the other one, 25, right aligned, and also make it white. Cool. And then we're going to set its pivot point, which, if you notice, because we've made it a child now, its pivot point is the center of the text score object. So this has now been placed relative to the center of that text field. So once again, we can click in our anchors, and this time we're going to say we want it to be placed relative to that side of the field, and then we can just click and drag it so that it's nicely lined up and sitting somewhere over there. And once again, we can size it back down a bit. So if we run that, we've got our score sitting over there. Alrighty. Cool. So now that we have a place to put our score, we need to actually update our score. So let's do that. Now, one of the things I probably haven't mentioned is if you select an object on your hierarchy and then hover over a scene window, so for instance I've just selected the bunny, and then you press the F key, it will find it for you and zoom in to that section. Very helpful. For instance, if you need to get back to the text score, you can highlight it, hover and press F to get back to wherever you want. So we'll press bunny, press F, back there, and we can zoom out a little bit. So in our bunny we have our bunny controller. I'm just going to close these up to make it a little bit cleaner. We have our bunny controller script over there, and what we need to do is we need to give the bunny controller script a reference to the text score field so that it can update the score as the game progresses. So if we jump into back to our code, what we're going to do is we have to import a different package because the code we're after is not in the base Unity engine package, but is in a sub package called UI, or user interface. So we'll import that package, and now that we have that package imported, we can do a public, so that we can see it in the inspector. A public text field. We're going to call this score text. And we can save that up, and if we jump back to Unity, we'll see once it compiles, it adds a score text field in there, and we can take our text score. Oh, I mistyped it. Whoops. Let's undo that. Jump back to our code. Fix the typo first. Score text. And back to there. Wait for that to compile. There we are, that's a bit better, and we'll grab that guy and drop it into there. Right, so now we've wired up our script to the text field. Cool. So we jump back to our code again. Now that we've got that in there, we need to populate this with a value. And so what we're going to do is we're basically going to calculate the score is the number of seconds that you've been alive. So what we need to do is actually figure out how long the player has been playing for. So we're going to create a new private variable of type float. We're going to call it start time. And what we're going to do is at the start of the game, or basically when the bunny is created, we're going to store away the current time. And then in our update method, pretty much whilst we're doing our update over here, somewhere after doing the animation, we can say we want to take score text, which is our text field at the top there, and we want to set its text value, so in other words the text that it is displaying on the screen, and we're going to set that equal to time.time, which is the current system time or the game time. We're going to subtract the start time, so now we know how long the scene has been running in seconds, and then we're going to, because it's a float, we're going to convert that. We have to convert that to a string, and we're also going to format that string into that format. So it's going to be 1 decimal place basically. All right. So if we jump back to our code and we run that, we now see our score updating and our bunny little jumping and our bunny dying when it hits the cacti. All right. Boop. Cool. Well, that's about it for this video. As always, please like this video if you liked it, share it with others of course, and remember to subscribe to this channel to receive notifications when I post a new video. Thank you for watching.